my job at this newspaper.
What? You're unemployed, no money, no girlfriend.
So is there like a job opening? You read. A week or two.
Oh, wow.
Is it Mia? Sex app.
We begin with Natalie, a high-class escort, heading to her client's room. The client, who is finishing up a business call, is dressed in an adult baby diaper. Unfazed, Natalie removes her coat and drinks a stiff drink before starting their session. She pretends to be his mommy, scolding him and taking away fake privileges while smacking him around. After their role play ends, the client returns to his normal self and invites her to stay and watch HBO with him. Realizing he won't pay extra for her time, Natalie decides to go home. During the taxi ride back, she removes her wig and contemplates her life as the bustling city passes by. Meanwhile, Mitch is waiting for the bus and calls his friend to say he's running late for dinner. When he arrives, he finds his friends attempting to set him up with a woman. The conversation is awkward as they struggle to find common ground. Mitch tries to compliment her, but she begins ranting about how the film industry exploits sex to sell movies. Uninterested, Mitch excuses himself to the bathroom to have some alone time. The bathroom attendant, aware of what Mitch is doing, remains professional. Mitch's friend JP comes in and urges him to return to the table, but then notices Mitch is on a hookup app. JP leaves when he gets a match himself. The next day, Mitch is at home and matches with another woman on the app. He goes to her apartment for another meaningless encounter. This pattern of fleeting connections continues as Mitch meets various women at different times. One night, he runs into Natalie at a bar, and they strike up a conversation. Initially, he mistakes her for someone he matched with on the app, but quickly realizes she's an escort, and any potential connection vanishes. The following day at work, Mitch is unexpectedly fired. His boss, in a rare moment of honesty, admits that Mitch is the best journalist, but the only one he can fire without facing a discrimination lawsuit. That night, Mitch reflects on his life, hooking up with more women from the app. The next day, Mitch meets JP for lunch, and JP tries to persuade him to get help. Mitch ignores the advice and embarks on a pointless job hunt around the city. After being turned away from a publication that doesn't fit his style, he convinces the editor to give him a chance. Later, Mitch decides to write an article about high-end escorts. He returns to the bar, asking for Natalie, but the bartender demands proof that he's not a cop. Refusing, Mitch leaves and runs into Natalie outside. He pitches his story idea to her, but she declines. After an unpleasant encounter with a client, Natalie tells her roommate she can't continue this work. Her roommate suggests she work for her pimp, but Natalie rejects the idea as too real. Instead, she considers Mitch's earlier proposition and decides to call him to set up a meeting. The following day, she brings him along for a morning appointment. To her surprise, he turns out to be a 10-year-old boy. Before anyone jumps to conclusions about inappropriate content, let's hold our horses. She's actually tutoring him in math. When they return to town, Mitch tries to ask her some questions. However, she insists on keeping their interaction friendly rather than turning it into an interview. Back at her apartment, she introduces him to Dana and Dominic, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. Curious about how she got into this line of work, Mitch heads to Nell's room. She explains that she took up this job to pay off her student loans. As they chat, he shares mundane details about himself, and she prepares for her nighttime client. After giving the client a makeover and a pep talk on the rules of being her protection, she sends him into the hotel room for a night to remember. Mitch waits outside, listening to the sound effects emanating from the room. It's a bit disturbing, and he wonders if Natalie is just on the other side of the door. Later, Natalie confesses that she receives rave reviews for her fake climaxing. Mitch isn't entirely surprised. Despite the unconventional circumstances, they seem to get along well. But one night, Natalie needs Mitch to step in and stop a rowdy man at the bar. It becomes clear that she's using him for protection, but she points out that they're both getting what they want from each other. Unexpectedly, Mitch suddenly receives a notification on his hookup app and decides to leave to meet his match. Unbeknownst to him, Natalie is following him. She tracks him to the bathroom of a bar, where she catches him in the act with his match. When Mitch emerges, Natal claps for his performance and learns about the app he's using. They discuss mutual STD scares. And during their conversation, Mitch impulsively asks Natal to come with him to meet his family that weekend. This sudden shift leaves one wondering if he's simply following his odd infatuation instincts. Mitch tries to play it off as if Natal is just a cover, but it becomes clear that meeting matches from the app is making him think more deeply and emotionally. The next day, Mitch has lunch with JP, who shares an inside scoop about his latest article. JP is blown away by the topic, but it resonates with Mitch. Later, Mitch and Natal head to his house to meet his sister and father. When they arrive, Mitch's sister, Anne, is stunned by Natal's beauty. Meanwhile, when Charles, Mitch's father, starts to belittle Mitch, Natal immediately steps in to defend him, making a strong impression on the family. Eventually, Mitch has a private conversation with Charles in his office, asking for help with a situation involving Ren. Natal listens from outside the door and hears Mitch pleading with his father. Charles, however, says he would help if he could, but his astrologist advised him to freeze his accounts due to Mercury being in retrograde. Mitch and Natal drop off Anne at one of her friends' houses. Mitch offers Natalie a chance to leave and go home, but she decides to stay and drink some wine at his family's house. Curious, Mitch asks her what got her into the escort business. She explains that during college, she made a PowerPoint presentation about all the guys she had slept with, which made it very difficult for her to get a job afterward. Just then, Mitch receives a text from Mem asking for them to pick her up because the other kids are making fun of her. Natalie goes to confront Mem's friends, but ends up at the wrong house, scolding a 5-year-old girl who answered the door. It's puzzling why such a young child would be answering the door at night. Later, Natalie, Mitch, and Mem return home to watch an old movie. Natalie reassures Mem that she has nothing to worry about, and eventually, Mem falls asleep. To maintain the appearance that they are dating, Mitch offers Natalie his bedroom. Natalie suggests he sleep in the room with her, leading to an inevitable intimate encounter. The next day, Natalie drops Mitch off at his apartment and lends him money for his rent. As Mitch's phone buzzes with hookup matches, he asks Natalie about her plans. She tells him she's headed to the clinic for a regular STD check. While Natalie is at the clinic, Mitch meets up with a girl but has a change of heart and walks out, deciding to join Natalie at the clinic. He waits with her in the waiting room. Later, Mitch helps JP assemble a desk, but gets frustrated when JP only points out problems. Talking to Natalie afterward, Mitch continues to assist her as her bodyguard. One day, Mitch comes home to find JP and his family staging an intervention. Interventions are frightening, and this one seems poorly planned. JP couldn't even gather enough people, so he included Mitch's landlord. When the landlord realizes the intervention is about Mitch's supposed sex addiction, he's baffled, not understanding why that's seen as a problem. Mitch storms out, telling his father and JP that they're never there for him. That night, Natalie confronts Mitch about his depressed attitude. He denies anything is wrong, but when a guy at the bar gets handsy with her, Mitch loses it and beats him up, getting them kicked out of the bar. Mitch goes home to brood, and Natalie follows to confront him. In a heated exchange, Mitch accuses Natalie of being an escort because she likes to control the situation and at least gets paid for something she was shamed for in college. Natalie fires back, saying Mitch isn't a sex addict, but an emotionally crippled child who uses sex as a crutch. Natalie storms out of Mitch's apartment, and life returns to its messy routine. Mitch starts working on his article about Natalie, while she resumes meeting clients on her own. Eventually, Mitch goes to his editor to tell her that he can't write the great story he promised her. He thanks her for the opportunity, but she notices that he has lost the drive he once had. She advises him to return to the heart of what initially inspired him. That night, Mitch heads to the bar where Natalie meets her clients and goes to her hotel room, seeking some alone time with her. He locks out her client to talk to her and immediately pours his heart out. Natalie, however, tells him off and goes back to work. Disheartened, Mitch heads home and looks over pictures of himself and Natalie, which inspires him to write the most compelling piece of work he has ever written. This rom-com takes an unexpectedly sentimental turn, almost becoming realistically emotional. Natalie, aiming to overcome her past and fight back against cyberbullying, goes to a school for an interview, and gets accepted into a master's program. This subplot is surprisingly inspiring. Although the movie is still a romantic comedy about sex, it delves deeper into the characters' emotional journeys. Mitch returns to his family's home and talks to Charles. Charles praises Mitch's article, calling it phenomenal, and asks what happened with Natalie. When Mitch admits he messed things up, Charles advises him to fix it or risk living a life of regret. Later, during lunch, Natalie shows up and tells Mitch that he misquoted her. As she explains what she would have really said, it becomes clear that she has genuine feelings for him. Natalie reveals that she has quit the escort life and has been accepted into an MBA program. Mitch is overjoyed for her and kisses her passionately in front of his dad and sister. Because, of course, love conquers all. As the movie ends, the credits roll, leaving the audience with a sense of closure and the classic feel-good vibes of a rom-com.